Hello. Today I'd like to talk to you about critical positions. Uh, I'm going to pinch a bit of fine commentary from a Indian international master and trainer called Sagar Shah, who discussed critical positions in an online article recently. And he says, let me start off with a conversation I had with an experienced grandmaster friend a few days ago. What, according to you, is a critical position? And the grandmaster replied, it's a position where you need to spend a good amount of time in order to make an important decision during the game. Okay, you've told me what to do during a critical position, but how do you recognise whether it's a critical position or not? I think a player can understand whether it's a critical position or not based on his feel and understanding of the game, his or her, we should say. Me, but then how do you explain whether it is a critical position or not to players who do not have a highly developed understanding of the game like you do? I really don't know. Well, I think that's slightly obscurantist, to be honest. I think we can get a little bit closer to it, but it's an amusing place to start. I'm going to suggest one type of critical position as a position where the outcome strongly depends on your choice of move, where the result may change by the wrong choice. For example, here's a position where you can see that I don't know if you can see that. So this is from Lichess, and I've got a computer to analyse the game, and I've asked it to list the top 4 moves for white, and the best move results in an evaluation of plus 11.2, which is to say that's a queen and a half worth of advantage to white if we play the right move. If we play the second best move, it's a draw, 0-0. If it's a third best move, it's a draw, 0-0. And if it's the fourth best move, it's fractionally better for black. So that's got to be a critical position. If you don't get the move right, it's going to change the result of the game. And sometimes you can see evaluations like that where the top one is positive and everything else is negative, which is to say if you don't find the right move, you'll lose. So that's one example of a critical position. How do you recognise it? Well, you can recognise it if you've got the engine going, but can you recognise it during a game? First of all, just use yourself as the computer. Maybe your own evaluation of the candidate moves shows a lot of variation, and maybe only one looks any good. That's starting to suggest to you that this position may be a critical one. That's to say, if you don't get it right, it'll change the result. If there's immediate threats or a crisis, or just a big decision, that I'll talk about that a little bit more later. It's your last chance to do something, which is maybe the exact previous example game. If there's lots of counterplay, I think every move during a period of active counterplay may be critical. Sudden change in the tension, that somebody drops a bomb on the board for some reason. And another clue is if your assessment of the position slightly advantageous to you perhaps, and your evaluation position at the end of the main line don't match. That's to say, you think you're okay here, but after a few moves of analysis, your assessment of the position that you're going to anticipate in the future is not so good. So maybe worse for you. So that's or something has just gone terribly wrong. So here's we see lots of critical positions in end games. In this position, well, it very much matters whose turn it is to move, and it also matters what moves you pick. With white to move, it's a win for white. Sorry, with black to move, it's a win for white, and with white to move, it's a draw. And but with black to move, even though it's a win for white, you can quite easily mess this up by choosing the wrong moves. And so that's a critical position where the result of the game may swing between draw and one for white, back and forth over several moves if the players don't know what they're doing. So there are critical endgame positions. There are also critical opening positions. Some positions, if you get the move wrong, you could end up with a terrible disadvantage. Sveshnikov, in his book about anti-Sicilians, describes this as a critical position, not because only one route leads to equality. Sveshnikov suggests that 2 moves lead to equality here. But after bishop to c4 here by white, what can you play? You can retreat the knight to b6, but there's also the possibility of taking on e5, which Sveshnikov also suggests leads to equality, but with a bit less theory. So it's critical in as much as it will lead to very different styles of game, perhaps, and one requires a lot of theory, and the one maybe less. So after bishop c4 here, what does black do? That's an example of an important decision, but not one that your life depends on. I can't remember where this is from, but it was a nice example. But thinking about this position in the Nidor Sicilian, white's just played f4, f5, the blue there, offering the g-pawn as a sacrifice. And do you take it? Do you not take it? And if you don't take it, what's the right move? Well, the discussion in the book suggests that this is indeed a critical position. If you take it, you're going to be met with an attack. But you might be able to, I think the phrase I'm going to use is get away with castling kingside, and that's the critical move in this position. The critical move in this critical position, because things are very tense. If you get this wrong, you could be checkmated by a kingside attack. Having said that, and having gone for a few opening moves here, what is considered critical may change. For example, in 1892, this position was indeed critical for the theory of the Ruy Lopez, and black to move in this position. What do you do? Now, I think as a result of a famous game and analysis by Tarrasch, he says black has to play taking on d4, even though your last 6 or 7 moves have been trying to organise a strong point of e5 so that you don't have to give up your stake in the centre. But Tarrasch says you have to. He takes d4, because if you just castle here, which was previously considered the correct move, you actually lose at least a pawn, and so that's a critical move. But I mean, if you look on Lichess at their masters database, there's no more than 200 games played in this position. And in fact, of those 200, the master in question, 12 cases got the move wrong, and castled here. So what's considered critical may change, because nobody reaches this line anymore. In Ruy Lopez, we normally play a6 early on, and we get into different lines. So this position was critical and isn't anymore. I can remember also there was a really quite a decent book by David Levy and Ray Keane, which discussed how to play the opening and attacking repertoire for white. It came out years ago. And I think against the Latvian Gambit, it was recommended that we play this variation of bishop to c4. And in Cambridge Chess, that R.G. Eales recounts the story of a player who analysed this position to death and reckoned that he could demonstrate a clear advantage to white in all lines, then, but of course it never comes up. Then one day somebody tries the Latvian Gambit against you, and then what happens? Well, he forgot his own analysis, went wrong and only drew, but was back the next day to demonstrate a carefully crafted refutation. But actually, I think if you show this to a computer these days, they say actually black might be able to survive this in the main line. And actually, it's much easier and more straightforward. Rather than play bishop to c4, is to take on e5, and that has to be the critical line. So what's considered critical may change depending on what the verdict is early on, and that's also true for a game. That the fact that you're facing a crisis on move 20 may be because you didn't choose the right move on move 10. Here's a critical position played between Walter Brown and Arthur Bisguier. Because I had O-level French, I used to pronounce that as Biguier, but apparently in America you pronounce that Bisguier. And the threat here, so black's doing okay as a Petrov, and black is kind of threatening to equalise, if that's a threat, by playing something like bishop to e6, bishop from f5 to e6 and castling. And then black, I'm sure, is fine. He's got the two bishops, no weaknesses, control of the light squares, and should be doing okay. However, hasn't castled yet, and if black manages to do so, they may well stand very well. So white's got to try and put them off that. If you play, for example, rook e5, queen d7 protects both bishops, and again threatens to castle into equality. So it may be that white's only got one chance now to do something to disrupt the black development, and it's not an easy move to spot. But the right move here for white is bishop from c1 to h6. And if black takes it, we play rook e5, hitting queen and bishop, and rook on a1 to e1, pinning the bishop against the queen and creating all sorts of mayhem. So we've got a critical position here, where only the right move is going to give white an advantage. And this is again from opening theory, but could be arisen in a random middle game. So that's an example of a critical position. And it's also how you can recognise one, because there's a threat to equalise in this case, but a threat. Also, you can find yourself in a critical position if something goes wrong. So here's white trying to set up a Yugoslav attack against the dragon, but it's the accelerated dragon, and with the move that black has saved, they managed to play knight from f6 to g4 to threaten your bishop, and so this is not going well for white. If you move the bishop, you'll lose the knight on d4. So this is something has gone wrong, and white needs to be very careful. In fact, what happened was white played the rather automatic in the game that I have in mind, f2 to f3, poking the knight and going some way towards setting up this Yugoslav set center. But f3 loses quite quickly to knight takes e3, queen takes e3, and queen to b6, pinning the knight against the undefended queen and winning a piece. So if something goes wrong, do think very carefully, because the position has been put into crisis, perhaps, and revealed itself to be in crisis by the fact that you're not able to set up your pieces in the way that you wanted. A sudden change in tension can be indicative of a critical position. I've been poddling away in this isolated queen pawn position. I'm sad to say I've lost the bishop pair, so don't think white's doing too well. When suddenly there appeared on the board queen from e6 to e4, which was not welcome, and threatening mate. And I've only how many ways I've got to avoid mate? I suppose I could play knight to f4, which clearly drops the e pawn. Actually, the d pawn's dropping. Sorry, the d pawn's dropping anyway. And if you play knight to f4, it could be chased away with a move like g5 when I'm in crisis again. So after queen e4, f3, bishop takes d4 check, white's clearly got some problems, and it was worth a bit of a think here, which I put in. And rather than the automatic knight takes d4, which and then queen takes d4 check, and I think black's doing pretty well. Just at the moment, with the pawn on f3 attacking a queen on e4, black's got a problem, and it may be that I can get them to capture on d4 without check by playing first king to h1. So king to h1, the queen moved, I then took on d4, and then black took on d4 with the queen, but that wasn't check, and then I had an opportunity to play bishop on c7 takes b6, and then actually take on a5, and white has a pawn advantage, but two connected pass pawns on the queen side, which I'm happy to say won me the game. That's a clue that you're in crisis when you're threatened with instant mate. Here's another example where I think white's doing okay here. If you can count some, positional advantages here. The very well posted minor pieces, the knight and the bishop, can't be budged. Bishop maybe thought was being theoretically bad, but it can't be bad on that square, can it? And an advantage in development. However, the next two moves rather put me on my mettle. A queen arrived on e3 with check, and a bishop arrived on c3, attacking my rook, and I suddenly realised how badly I'd lost control of the dark squares. The threat is from rook on a8 to a1, which is going to give me some problems sorting myself out. And it may be that I've got some other problems here. I mean, I actually don't think white's doing too badly here, but I thought, well, actually, that's very suddenly the complexion of the game has changed. That I'm being threatened with checks and captures and so on, and that now is well worth a think to see what's going on, and do I have to start retreating and defending? And in fact, the best move here, which I managed to find, is queen to h5. Refusing to retreat and actually making a counter attack on the black king. If black captures the rook on b4, we can play knight to g6 check, king moves, take on f8, and if black recaptures on f8, obviously it's mate on f7. So white's got a storming attack suddenly out of that move. And after queen to h5, black retreated with queen to e8, when we could hoover the queens off and relax into a normal sort of position where white's advantages are the main thing going on the board. Last chance to do something. Again, this is the sort of typical related to that Brown-Bisguier example. Here, Garry Kasparov is playing a chap called Dubiel, and if you were black in this position, it was your go. I think you'd want to play something like c5, releasing your bishop on b7 and hitting away at white's centre in a position where the d pawn maybe can't advance to d4, d5 because it's black's got that square nicely covered. So if that's the move that you want to stop, this may be your last chance. If that's the move that black wants to play, this may be your last chance to stop it. And Kasparov stopped it by playing c4 to c5. So that's your last chance to stop that move, I think, and was well taken. Here's another couple of examples from a game between Alexander Morozovich and our very own Mark Hebden. The centre game is played here, where blacks played the correct recommended theoretical response to the centre game, and white is gambiting the e-pawn. Now, Mark Hebden plays the centre game from time to time, and I wonder what he thought Morozovich had up his sleeve. I don't know if Morozovich knew that. He may well have done with chessbase and all that. And so the right move is to take the e-pawn for black, but black decided not to and played d6. A few moves later, white's managed to organise this raging kingside attack, and after h5 to h6, the position was critical. So, h6 being a critical move in a critical position. Now, this is a critical position, but it's only critical because Mark didn't play the right move earlier on and ducked the opportunity to play the correct theoretical line. Now, who knows what Morozovich has had up his sleeve, but that's an example where a critical position now is a result of a critical decision taken earlier on. Here's a critical position. White's got mate in 3, starting with rook to f4, rook to h4, and mate on h7. This is between Magnus Carlsen and Viswanathan Anand, Vishy as he's often recalled, and So what's black going to do about it? I suppose black's going to do about it the only thing they can do about it, which is to create a diversion on the queen side with b3 to b2, and if need be, b2 to b1, making a queen, which is what he did. And actually, Anand went wrong slightly. Well, not slightly. Went very wrong and allowed black to win this position and win the match and win the world championship. So that was indeed very critical. But you can the critical nature of this is indicated by the terminal nature of the white threats. And lastly, or towards the end of what we're saying, here's an example from Sagar Shah himself, who gives this as an example of a critical position. I think black's doing quite well with the control of the light squares. I don't know what this opening was, but it looks a bit Nimzo Indian-y. Oh, it can't be with a pawn on c2. Anyway, it certainly looks, it still feels Nimzo Indian-y to me. We have a sort of active white knights, black knights playing against pawn weaknesses and weak squares. But white's got some nice activity, particularly with this knight on e5, and of course if you try and chase it away with something like f6, your g6 pawn goes. Anyhow, Shah had a good old think about this and came up with what turned out to be not the right plan. Actually, the right move here, the critical move, and the right move actually is to play f6, let white take on g6 if they choose, and after rook on f8 to e8, black's much better mobilized. White's extra pawn doesn't seem to make a lot of difference in this position, and black can make a right nuisance of themselves with their active pieces. A nice example actually of where piece activity is more important than material. So that proved to be the critical position. I don't know. He doesn't say in his commentary whether he realised this at the time, but certainly proved to be in hindsight. It may be a reluctance to look at it because it's losing material, and that may prove to be fatal. But actually, the activity was good enough. And I think that's all I have to say to you about that. So hope you got something out of that. See you next time.